All right, what is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I'm your host, JK, and we are kicking off episode number 181 of Help Me Understand. Before getting into today's topic, which is going to be talking about answering the question, is it better for me to lose weight first or try to build muscle first? I want to first say thank you for choosing to press play on Help Me Understand. You certainly have no shortage of podcasts that you can listen to these days, especially. So I truly never take it for granted that you chose to press play on Help Me Understand. If you could do me one simple favor, and that is to leave either a comment and or rating and review of the podcast on whatever platform you are listening to this on, I would sincerely appreciate it. So let's go ahead and get into today's episode, which is actually going to be the start of a series that I intend to keep going, or a cadence that I intend to keep throughout 2025. And that is where the Tuesday episode will feature one or more training topics. If you just heard me catch myself from saying at least one and change that to one or more, and you're wondering what's up with that, what's the deal with that, swing back a couple of episodes where I talk about intentional language. So there's a little teaser, I guess, to go back and listen to that particular episode. So if you do ever hear me catch myself when I'm saying I'm going to do at least 3 or at least 4, I'm working on switching that language to 3 or more or 4 or more. So setting the floor instead of always setting a ceiling in particular cases. So back to the main point. A cadence that I will be using for the Help Me Understand podcast in order to gain more consistency with putting out episodes and also provide some structure with the multitude of different topics I like to cover and ensure that I am consistently getting some of a fitness focus content out there, is that Tuesday's episode will feature one or more answers to fitness questions, talking about fitness topics. And when I say fitness, that also can certainly include things about nutrition, mindset related to fitness, sleep, the different things that go into someone's overall fitness and health. So with that being said, there will be a link in the show notes to a Google form where you can submit a question, whether it has to do with fitness, nutrition, sleep, mindset, or otherwise. So I would definitely be open to hearing any suggestions that you have for topics that you'd like me to cover on the Tuesday episode, along with any particular questions. I'll do my best to try and see if I can make it an option where you could submit it anonymously if you would like to. Otherwise, I'll have a field in there and you could just leave a fake name. Like, that's totally fine. If you want to remain anonymous, all good there. Topic that I want to cover today is related to me taking some time to think about my own journey in the fitness space, and specifically pre-coaching. So my pre-coaching journey, and thinking about how I initially started things off. So when I first started really intentionally going to the gym on a regular basis, my focus was primarily on getting jacked. That's what I wanted to do. So for those who are not totally familiar with the story, and I've told it multiple times in different episodes, and I think I've done at least one, if not 2 episodes where I've kind of done the deep dive into my origin story when it comes to just my own fitness prior to coaching. The initial place where I got my workouts from was the Men's Health Big Book of Exercises. I went to either Borders or Barnes and Noble, don't remember which one right off the top of my head, and I bought that book, and I bought a workout journal and some fingerless workout gloves. Yeah, that was me. And went to the gym and was doing some workouts out of that, and then also making some changes. So my whole kind of passion for programming seemed to develop super early with making adjustments to workouts from the Men's Health Big Book of Exercises. And then I was also reading fitness magazines at the time, like Muscular Development, and I think Muscle and Fitness was another one, and pulling workouts from there, just different things like that. However, one thing that I do distinctly remember is that when I did start my fitness journey, my primary focus was not specifically on losing X amount of weight right off the bat. My focus was on trying to get jacked and build as much muscle as possible. And I would love to say that this was based on some very well researched, detailed, well thought out, intentional, strategic plan. And it absolutely was not. When I think back, and I've talked about this before, when I think back to the influences that were on me at that time, being a guy, the majority of the marketing that was targeting me, and this would be me in my very early 30s at this point. So I'm 46 now. How old am I? Yeah, I'm 46 now. It sounds about right. And so I started when I was about 30, 31 years old. And at that time, the majority of the marketing, and I think it's kind of this way now, to be quite frank with you, the majority of the marketing towards my demographic was about being strong, being jacked, somewhat lean, but really that was really the tenor of things. And I think about that and the contrast with what was being marketed to me at the time, which was all about get jacked, get swole, all that good stuff. And the contrast of what was, and in many terms right now, is marketed towards women, which is, get lean, get smaller, get skinny. Now, from my perspective, that has changed and evolved over time. From the things that I see, and I understand that, my perspective is not shared by all, I do see for sure from my end much more of a focus on, or more of a louder voice and more focus on women building muscle and not specifically chasing skinny, like that sort of a thing. So I just bring that up just to say, when I first got things rolling, there wasn't necessarily a whole lot of pressure that I felt to lose a whole lot of weight. It was more about like getting muscular, so looking muscular at that time. So in my head, the easiest way, or the best way, I should say, to do that was to really focus on getting as much muscle as possible. And I can even recall, as I started to lift weights and there started to be a noticeable difference in my physique, to the point where other people were starting to comment and ask about different things that I was doing and asking me, what have you been up to? Because you're definitely you're looking pretty swole, like that sort of a thing. I can remember saying, well, here's my plan. Like, I'm going to try and build as much muscle as possible. And then I'll worry about losing the fat later. Like, that was my whole strategic plan. Now, it actually did end up benefiting me because I didn't start off with a whole lot of cardio at all. I believe at the time I would do somewhere around maybe 20 minutes on the high end. I would do 20 minutes on the elliptical. I'd do maybe 10 minutes at the beginning and 10 minutes at the end, or sometimes 20 minutes at the beginning. And then when I started to read information about how you should do cardio after you lift weights, then I started following that. So I would do 20 minutes on the elliptical at the end. I will say for sure that my adherence was not great with doing the cardio after lifting, just because I didn't enjoy cardio. I'm still not a huge cardio buff. However, in doing some thinking about that, especially with this being the newer year, and I'm working on something behind the scenes here with re-engaging, just kind of going back to the beginning and really just going back and reflecting on choices that I made in the past, and then taking a look from an observation standpoint in the gym, what sort of things am I seeing and reading and hearing about with folks that are on their fitness journey in kind of the first half of the stages, I would say. I think that there's a common question that can come up. So I wanted to spend a few minutes just talking about that. I first wanted to give you some context just from my standpoint, what my journey was, because I believe that that's helpful for some to understand the bias that I'm going to have. And I don't say bias in a negative way in any way, shape, or form. Maybe a better way to say it is to understand where my context comes from. So a common question that I believe is out there for folks that are really just getting started. So I'm talking in the 0 to 3 stage. So if we're talking 0 to 10, they're in the 0 to 3 stage. Maybe they've dabbled a little bit in doing some sort of resistance type training here or there, or maybe taken a class or two, but really have not consistently exercised hardly ever at all. And that's who I was. back when I first started. I was the person who, when I say that I did not intentionally step into a weight room until I was about 30, 31 years old, I truly I'm telling you the truth there. There was one time where I was in a weight room when I was at St. Louis Community College. I had signed up for a class that was required, and I didn't realize that it was in the weight room. It was some sort of like gym class, or you had to meet a physical education requirement for at the time. And I remember when I showed up and was trying to find the class, and then it was in the weight room, I dropped that class. Like immediately I dropped that class. Like that's how much I was not interested in lifting weights. So, oh, how the tables have turned. So the question that I believe would be asked is, hey, I am looking to change my body. So I want to change my body. Should I first focus on losing weight, or should I focus on building muscle? So that's what I want to talk about. And I'm actually not going to spend a whole lot of time on the science of it because, and I tested this, you can put that into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT will actually give you a pretty decent answer. So if you were to put the prompt in of you tell ChatGPT, you are a personal trainer. I am someone who is looking to lose 20 pounds, but I also have heard that it's good for me to build muscle. So would you recommend that I try to lose weight first or build muscle? ChatGPT will give you a very solid overall answer. So for all of the AI haters out there, there are situations where ChatGPT will be helpful because it will give you a particular answer that is totally spot on. And I would emphatically co-sign the answer most likely that it will give you. And what it will do is it will talk to you about the importance of doing both. It will even, well, actually, I don't know if the models are totally different, but the model that I use will even talk to you about phasing and a couple of things like that. Now, getting that information is very different than actually implementing that information for humans and helping them understand what point they're starting at, how to adjust those particular phases to fit their lifestyle and all of those things. So my answer to that particular question, if someone were to come to me and say, I have a goal of losing 20 pounds, would it be better for me to focus first on losing the weight, or would it be better for me to focus on building muscle? Because I do understand the importance of building muscle. Where should I start? So me being who I am, what I would do is I would first start with, well, help me understand where the goal of losing 20 pounds is coming from. So talk to me a bit about where that goal comes from. So I would take some time to get an understanding of why that's important and what that means to the individual. Now, I will tell you that 2000 and let me see, I got into training in 2015 as a personal trainer. So I would say 2015 up till about probably 2017, JK would have first started with going on some sort of unsolicited sermon about the difference between losing weight and losing body fat and changing your body composition. I likely, if I'm thinking about it, I immediately would have started going into that. Kind of like back then, 2015 to 2017-ish, JK would have likely responded when somebody says, I just want to tone. I would have went into some sort of unsolicited sermon that the person didn't sign up for to first clarify. So when you say tone, you mean that you want to actually build muscle and have that muscle be visible, because toning isn't really a thing. Like I would have felt like I needed to make sure that they understood what they were saying first. And I have evolved my approach quite a bit now where I'm not immediately looking to correct, because I look at that as like a correction, not looking to correct what the individual is saying. I'm trying to get an understanding of meeting them where they are. So first I would ask them some questions about where that goal of 20 pounds is coming from. Ask them to share with me the vision of when you lose that 20 pounds, what does that do for you? So what is that doing for you physique wise? What is that doing for you lifestyle wise? Like what's really behind that? And then as we start to unpack that, that's when then I would start to weave in information about, okay, so when we're looking at 20 pounds and something that will come up in a very, very real conversation like this is that the person will often identify particular milestones, important moments, or phases of their life where they weighed 20 pounds less than they currently do or somewhere around there. So let's say, for example, that somebody is about 150 right now. I am completely making up a number. So let's say that they weigh 150 pounds right now and they're focused on, I need to lose about 20 pounds. Through conversation, and this is very real, and I'm certainly not going to break the confidence of anyone who I've talked to before, so you don't really know who I'm talking about. I have conversations with folks who have a weight loss goal and ask for some of the why behind those particular goals, and they will be very specific in identifying, well, I just remember that the last time that this particular person who means a lot to me actually like said that they were proud of me or that they were really attracted to my physique, it's when I was around that particular weight. Also, a very common one can be, well, especially for if I'm working with a female, it can be something that's related to pre-baby weight. That can be a very common one. It can also be, I just remember when I was around that particular weight, I just felt like I had more energy and different things like that. So what I'm doing during that particular conversation is I'm slowly but surely trying to unpack the actual goal that the person is trying to reach, because typically the goal that they're trying to reach is related to a particular feeling that they want to feel again, the ability to do certain things that they maybe haven't been able to do with comfort, the ability to wear certain things that they haven't been able to wear recently because they're not comfortable in their own skin. And maybe it truly is because of weight gain. I mean, sizes are sizes. Like those things are definitely real. And what we start to do during that particular conversation, and this isn't necessarily all in one conversation, this is something that it takes time to build a connection and then slowly but surely unpack these things. So I don't necessarily argue with folks over particular weight goals and things like that they have. I just ask for some understanding of, as they're going through this process, how are they going to gauge that they're moving towards their goal in addition to the scale, because history tells me that the physique that the individual's looking for, along with the different things that they want their body to be able to do performance-wise, and the level of comfort in their skin that they are looking to feel, likely weighs more than they actually think. So very often, the physique that people are identifying that they're thinking is 20 pounds less is, and I'm ballparking, I'm just making up a number, it's often half of that less. Like many times I am working with folks, who don't necessarily quote unquote need to lose as much weight as they think they do to get the physique that they're actually looking for. What they're ideally looking for is actually a shift in body composition, which within the fitness industry, when we talk about body composition, we are basically talking about percentage of body fat and percentage of muscle mass. Like those are basically the two main things that we're talking about. Certainly your skin and your organs make up a portion of your weight also. However, the two things that we're primarily focused on is percentage of body fat and percentage of muscle mass. So when somebody is to come to me and ask me, hey, I want to lose weight, ultimately I want to lose weight, should I start by focusing on that? Or should I focus on trying to build or maintain muscle because I know that's important? I would start, again, like I said, unpacking it. And what I would steer them towards is, let's do a combination of focusing on shifting your body composition through proper nutrition, focusing on your sleep habits, and getting in strength training along with low intensity movement and the right mix of cardio. So all of those things together. So overall, how you eat, sleep, and exercise, for those of you who are in my reset program or have been a part or have listened to a couple of podcasts where I've talked about this, this is really the three-headed monster that you put together: how you eat, how you sleep, and how you exercise. So if they were like, well, that doesn't, I don't know, that still doesn't answer it though. Like, because what if the scale isn't going down as much as I want it to? And so that's where I would then talk to them about implementing other pieces along with the scale. So it would be things like photos, measurements, having certain clothes that it's like their try-on clothes. Those are the clothes that they typically are going to try on to see like, okay, where's my progress? Because I remember working with a couple of clients at a certain point in time where, as we were unpacking during their intake, I was unpacking with them, okay, well, when you lose this certain amount of weight, like what's that going to do for you and things like that. And I was just picking up on something that just, there's a question that I'm missing. And I used to work in the fashion retail industry. Like, actually, that makes it sound way more serious than it was. I worked for like the Gap. I worked for Loft by Ann Taylor. So I've worked in the clothing industry for a while, in the retail clothing industry. I don't currently now and haven't for about 10 years. However, with being in that particular industry, you get a really good understanding of, how the way that clothes do or do not fit off the rack can affect someone's body image. I mean, you get basically a front row seat to that. So in a couple of those conversations, I remember saying like, hey, can you talk to me a little bit about where this is coming from, like where this need is coming from? So talk to me a little bit about, like, summer is coming up. Are there certain things that you typically like to wear that are fitting differently? And they're like, yeah, actually, there's these green shorts that I like to wear. And I tried them on the other day and they didn't even button. And it's the first time in like 2 years. They're my favorite Ralph Lauren shorts or whatever it was, and they just don't fit. And I'm like, okay, so that is contributing to what's kind of going on here. So why don't we also include, possibly, as long as we can do it from a healthy standpoint, I'm talking from a mental health standpoint, include that as part of the progress. Like, you want to be able to fit in those particular shorts again. And before anybody is thinking like, oh man, are you talking like, it's like 17 sizes down or something ridiculous? No, this was something where through conversation, we realized we were literally talking like 2 pant sizes or something like that. So with my understanding of fashion, I was able to discern, okay, based on the time frame that they're giving me and also the size that they're talking about, this is definitely doable. And it's not something that needs to be done with a whole, like, let's go crazy, do nothing but cardio, eat like tree twigs and bark and maybe lick some dirt, and that's all you get for the day. We don't need to go that extreme. We can do this very methodically while also getting this individual stronger and getting some muscle on their frame. So what I would have someone focus on is really a focus on body composition versus specifically trying to lose weight or build muscle. I would talk to them about understanding body recomposition, which is really, we use that term in the fitness industry to talk about the process of both building muscle and losing weight at the same time. Now, for the sake of this particular conversation, we're talking about somebody who's fairly new to the process, right? So remember that I said this is somebody that's like in that 0 to 3 range as far as exercise history or anything like that. So one of the great things about being someone who's in that 0 to 3 range, that's somebody who we would consider pretty much a newbie on a scale of 0 to 10. 0 to 3, you're in the newbie phase. Pretty much at that point, just about anything that you do consistently will work. So if you decide that you're going to do a combination of lifting weights and then lifting weights 3 days a week and then going to your favorite Zumba class twice a week, you're going to see results. If we decide that we're going to do nothing but lift weights, you'll see results, because prior to that, coming into it, you weren't really doing a whole lot of anything specific. So that's where it can be an advantage, and it doesn't have to heavily skew so more from one direction to the next. So I mentioned before starting, or kind of midway into talking about this particular topic, that I wasn't going to make it super strategic, like science-based. And I'm going to shift from that just to finish things out, because what I really want to have folks consider is the psychological aspect of first putting all of the focus on weight loss prior to putting focus on building muscle. So from a psychological aspect, here's the scenario that I want to paint for you. And this is a very real scenario from someone. So what they did is they took it upon themselves they did a training program, not a training program. They went through their own weight loss journey for 90 days. It's about 90 days, I think it was. So this is an individual. They went through a weight loss journey for about 90 days, and they worked out 1 to 2 times per day. Which isn't necessarily awful for everybody. Like sometimes people hear like working out twice a day, and I mean, there are times recently where I've worked out twice a day. And what that looks like though is like some zone 2 in the afternoon, and then I'd lift weights in the morning. So, I mean, I assume that people would count that as working out twice a day. Working out twice a day doesn't necessarily mean you go to like CrossFit in the morning and then power lift at night. Like doesn't always mean that. However, with this individual, they worked out 1 to 2 times a day. And what they would do is they would go for a run for about 30 to 45 minutes. And then they would do like a stair stepper or elliptical for about 30 minutes. And this was for about 90 days. And let's say it's about 4 to 5 days per week, like pretty consistently. And then also they revamped their diet, so their nutrition. They really focused on more whole foods. They did less eating out with their partner, and significantly cut back on alcohol, I'm not sure what they did as far as sleep goes. This individual was not working with me, just someone that I was connected to. So they went through this particular period, and they were losing my train of thought. Their strategy was to do this so that they could get down to a particular weight. So I believe they started at like let's say in the 200 to 210 range. I can't quite remember, the 200 to 210 range. And their plan all along was I'm at 200 to 210. I'm going to do this cardio for the most part, watch my diet. And once I get under 180, so that was their goal. Their goal was get into the 170s. And once I get into the 170s, then I'll start to slowly implement weightlifting. And when we're talking weightlifting, what they were going to be doing is like some follow along workouts off of YouTube, with some dumbbells and things like that, which again, all follow along workouts. Like a follow along workout doesn't mean that it's trash. So sorry to burst your bubble for any of the hypertrophy bros or sisses out there. Like just because it's a follow along doesn't mean it's trash. The person that they were actually going to follow along, pretty solid. It's just that the approach that they had and the feedback that I had for them was I was more concerned about the psychological aspect of what they were doing than I was the scientific or the exercise science portion of what they were doing. And here's why. So when you first start off, primarily focused on the scale as the main indicator of whether or not you are succeeding, and then you hit your goal. So the goal is to get under 180. They get to 176. I believe that was the number. So they get to 176. So now they start to implement lifting weights. Well, here's the thing that happens. As you start to lift weights, you may see that weight loss progress start to slow down. And while the individual says like, yeah, I'm totally cool with that, history says that when you've been hyper focused on the scale as the primary / only indicator of whether or not you are succeeding, and then you implement something else that potentially is going to keep the scale the same or may even cause the scale to go up, because you're going to hopefully gain some muscle, because you're either building or maintaining muscle at that point. However, your body composition is changing. It can easily start to get in your head because for so long you have attached the reward to the weight loss. So then what happens is when you then implement the weightlifting, the strength training, the resistance training, however you want to phrase it, like when you start putting in the strength training, then the scale doesn't necessarily still move the same way that it was doing when you were doing nothing but cardio. Again, you're a newbie, so pretty much anything works. What can easily happen is that even though you may be seeing body composition changes, even though clothes may be fitting better, even though you're starting to see some of that muscle tone that you hadn't seen before because you recognize, like, hey, I do need to lift weights in order to see muscle. Even though those things are happening in the back of your head, you're like, yeah, but for the last 90 days, like, I was able to get that dopamine hit of periodically seeing that scale like go down week over week over week over week. Like, I was really successful with that, and I expected it would slow down, but not this much. And this is where the very common conversation comes up of, like, I can't count on two hands plus anybody else who's listening to this, if I could borrow your hands too, an infinite number of times where I've been talking to someone who says, I just feel like, this is going well, this is going well. So they'll list a whole host of things. I'm sleeping better. My clothes fit better. I feel better than I've ever felt before. I have tons of energy. My libido is like off the charts. Like, we're good. My partner can't keep their hands off of me. I feel like I'm in a better mood. Just all of these things. And then, but the number on the scale just hasn't really changed as much as I want it to. And I'm like, okay, so you just listed, legit, not even exaggerate, you just listed 7 things that are all going really well and all check the box of the things that you talked about that you wanted as part of your fit lifestyle. You wanted all of these things, and all of these things are happening. However, it's not happening with the same number that you expected. So remember earlier in this episode when I said very often what I will find is that the physique and the strength and the performance aspects that the goals that people have often are going to be in a body that may weigh more than they think it weighs. And I can't tell you just how many times I've had that particular conversation. And sometimes it's related to, especially if it's somebody who's newer, sometimes and very often it's related to, they took the approach of, I'm going to focus on weight loss first. And then once I lose weight, then I'll focus on building muscle. So to start pulling this car into the driveway, or landing the plane, as they say, I don't know who they is, but people say that. So to start landing the plane here, my overall suggestion is, if you are someone who is newer to exercise and you have a weight loss goal, I do not recommend starting with primarily only focusing on the weight loss and waiting until you hit your quote unquote goal weight. I'm going to say quote unquote because if you're not watching this on YouTube or on video, then you won't see my air quote fingers. If you're waiting until you reach your weight loss goal to build muscle, you potentially may be giving yourself more of like a mind F. I don't swear. So you're messing with your head more than you need to. Like, this whole thing, this fitness and health journey has enough things that could potentially get in your head and outside influences and all these other things. It doesn't really need your help. So my recommendation would be to focus on body recomposition as opposed to specifically focusing on weight loss. Now, the way that you do that is very different by individual. Howbeiver, as my grandfather used to say, howbeiver, overall, what we would do is a combination of lifting weights and doing cardio, along with some low intensity movement. The majority of the focus is going to need to be on your nutrition and on your sleep. So ideally, you'd take some time to establish your foundational nutrition. Also make sure that you're getting to bed at a reasonable time, waking up around the same time, all of those different things. So that's my answer to the question of, I've got X amount of pounds to lose. I also know it's important to build muscle. Should I focus on losing weight first and then build the muscle, or should I do something different? So hopefully that's provided some insight. If you are someone who is looking to get a bit more information about what I may be able to offer in that particular process, you can certainly reach out. and be more than happy to set up a conversation where we can talk through some of those things. So I will go ahead and start to close things out. Don't forget that I am asking for your help. I'm asking for your feedback, your questions, whatever you may have, whether it's training related or otherwise. Again, I'll have a link in the show notes where you can submit ideas for topics. However, every Tuesday, one or more training topics I'm going to cover. So I'd love to make sure that I'm covering something that you actually want to hear. So with that, thank you again for listening to the Help Me Understand podcast. This has been episode number 181. Take care, and I'll talk to you later.